Cyberpunk 2077. It was hyped and marketed as a consequence-driven open-world game with heavy RPG elements. This gives me similar vibes to other games that have tried the same thing like Deus Ex games or Assassin's Creed games. Your decisions on individual dialogue choices, how you approach missions, what factions you align with, will all result in consequences for you, the character, and how your main story plays out. This is the first lie of Cyberpunk.
Welcome to the gameplay demo walkthrough of CD Projekt Red's upcoming title, Cyberpunk 2077, a narrative-driven, open-world RPG set in a dark version of the future.
It's hard to tell exactly when this approach was abandoned by CD Projekt Red, but like others on the platform have speculated, I assume this happened shortly after Keanu's great reception at E3. As a result, I'm pretty sure he was given a bigger role in the main story. The game seems to have been more focused on a rags-to-riches story revolving around Jackie and the player coming up in Night City together. This is, again, speculation, but by analyzing how much more interaction the 2018 gameplay trailer has with Jackie, such as when Jackie can be your cover during the meet with Meredith Stout, and how that choice was completely cut from the game along with many others, we can assume that Jackie's role was cut significantly. I assume this was to make way for Johnny Silverhand. The reason I mention all this is because it feels like the game struggles with its open world and linear story elements. The term that comes to mind is railroading. What this means is that because the game has a linear story with a linear ending, no matter what decisions you make in the open world, it will result in the same conclusion. Doing side quests for Pan Am and Judy and a few of the other characters can result in a few different approaches you take at getting to that linear ending, but it results in the same thing. You either walk yourself into cyberspace and give Johnny Silverhand your body, or you retake your body with a limited amount of time to live and fulfill your destiny as a legend of Night City by going on some mysteriously funded raid on a space station.
I can't believe it. Everything. All we did. It was pointless. I've had enough of this. Of everything. You most of all.
The last thing I'll say about choice in the game when it comes to other characters is that depending on how you approach certain missions, you get different ending messages on your voicemail from other characters. But that's literally the extent of your dialogue choice in Cyberpunk. I mean, as far as consequences go, you never align yourself with any factions or become an enemy of any such factions. Almost all the dialogue in the game is there for flavor and nothing else. It's like getting handed a plate of spices instead of spiced meat. There is no meat to go along with your choices. There's only flavor text. So now we know what Cyberpunk isn't. It is not what we were promised.
Cyberpunk is a mature, visceral experience, and as such, it will let you explore a variety of different interactions with the game world, and as you just saw, its people. It's part of our creative process to draw inspiration from the pen and paper system created by Mike Pondsmith, and to put our own 2077 spin on it. Since Cyberpunk 2077 is an RPG, the jacket not only provides us with protective stats like armor, but it also increases our street cred. V's current apartment is located inside here. A generic ad has morphed into an advertisement specifically tailored to V.
That might be okay for some people, especially me. I had no idea what this game was going to be when it came out. Like I said, I made an effort not to get on the hype train and research what this game was going to be before it released because I wanted to go into it with open eyes and see what they gave us. So, what did we end up getting out of Cyberpunk 2077? Now, it's at this point that I feel like I can't go any further into talking about the game without talking about how the game released. It's no secret by now if you've been paying attention to media that the game had terrible console releases and an incredible amount of bugs. Most of these bugs end up being just visual bugs that don't make a big difference, but there have been reports of quest locking bugs where the players can't progress side quests or even the main quest. Now, that being said, bugs can be patched, and the game can be further optimized, but what can't be patched out of the game is what we're left with. Credit where credit is due. Night City is a beautiful open world. It's extremely well designed in my opinion. There's plenty of nooks and crannies and avenues to explore. The problem is that there's absolutely no reward for doing so. Not only is there no reward for exploring the game, but there's pretty much nothing to do at all. Once you've completed everything that's marked for you on the map, you're done. There is nothing to revisit. I mean, if the main story not having any replayability but the lack of choice wasn't bad enough, the open world has nothing to offer you either. This is where the game is really showing that it struggled with its own design. The city is constantly calling you to its beautiful neon atmosphere, begging to be explored. The problem again is a lack of substance. All of this to say that the game has absolutely no benefit by being an open world game. Most of the content that revolved around the open world was cut, such as the subway system. So what we're left with is an empty world. There really is nothing to do other than the quests. So why even bother allowing the player to explore the entire world? I think if CyberPunk ended up taking the same approach Deus Ex Mankind Divided did, where there's a hub world that hosts the quests, you go and do them, you complete that hub world and you move on to the next, as far as the content is concerned, nothing would have really changed. Alright, so I think at this point we've pretty much established that the game world is pointless and empty. But that being said, how are the characters in the game? Taking the linear approach to storytelling does have some advantages, and they are realized here. The game does have some interesting character development, and it's not like it's a completely terrible story. It's not bad. I wouldn't say it's anything amazing, but it is interesting enough to keep me playing for the entire thing up till the end. It's weird, the whole time I'm playing the game, I can't help but compare the game a little bit to Grand Theft Auto 5. Let me explain what's on my mind. Rockstar 2 has always seemed to have struggled with having a big open world to explore compared to very linear storytelling elements. What I mean by this is that in Rockstar games, it's very typical to get into the main story and be sort of locked in the way that you can approach it. For example, there's sneaking missions in Grand Theft Auto 5 and in Red Dead Redemption where if you do anything but stray from the main path that the game gives you, you instantly fail the mission and have to start again. Now, CyberPunk has this problem but sort of in the opposite direction, where all the missions kind of give you a dynamic approach on how you want to handle them. You can go in stealthily, you can go in loud, sometimes all you have to do is hack the right computer, so you can sneak past everybody if you want. It gives you options on how you want to approach the mission, where Rockstar games don't give you that option, they expect you to do it one way. The difference is, when you finish a Rockstar mission, you can sometimes see an effect in the main world after you're done, whereas when you complete a CyberPunk mission, it's like it never even happened. So, the game is like Grand Theft Auto, but kind of reversed. In Rockstar missions, the way you can approach them is extremely linear, but there can be results to the end of the story. Whereas with Cyberpunk, the way you can approach the missions isn't linear, but the endings for them all are. I don't know, that's just an offhand sort of thought, but it kind of explains what I'm trying to get at here. Both games struggle with how they want to combine an open world aspect to a linear storytelling aspect, and neither one of them does it right. And I think that about sums up how I feel about the main story in the world. So let's move on to something else, the core gameplay mechanics. I won't lie, CyberPunk did alright here. I find that the game is interesting enough with the amount of variety you can choose on how you build your character. There are many different ways to approach your build. You can choose to be a melee-focused character with either lethal or non-lethal melee weapons, such as katanas or blunt weapons like bats. Not only can you choose to focus on different primary weapons, such as assault rifles, SMGs, shotguns, and pistols, but you can also specifically choose a different type of these weapons, such as like smart weapons, or power weapons, or tech weapons to greater focus in on what you want your character to be competent with. And really, this is where the fun is for me, because if we start looking any deeper into this system, we start to get a little disappointing again. The reality is, in Cyberpunk, customization of your character is limiting beyond belief. Starting with character creation, the game originally was going to have third-person conversation cutscenes with characters after completing a certain mission or during other important events, giving purpose to customizing your character. That part of the game was cut out, so now the only purpose to designing a character is your ending cinematic, because aside from checking your inventory, or the buggy mirrors, or buggy motorcycles in third person, you'll never get to see your character. You can't even change your character's appearance after the character creation screen, with exceptions to clothing and augmentations like gorilla arms, mantis blades, or the rocket launcher arm, whatever that's called. Well, at least we got clothes and augmentations, right? Well, yes, and again, no. So the problem with clothing is that clothing is armor, and armor is leveled to your character. So as you're playing the game, You might have a certain style that you want to upkeep, but unfortunately, because of the buggy crafting system, keeping yourself in enough components to keep your current clothing upgraded well enough to be able to actually be feasible, I had to take certain perks in the technical ability tree that gives me more components than an item is worth to build in return for disassembling those items. This created basically a completely broken economy where I could make items and then receive back more components than it took to make that item, basically giving me completely infinite upgrades and money and item crafting. I could basically buy out everything in the game because by disassembling items I've crafted, I actually receive more components than it took to craft that item initially. This is a complete oversight. It has to be. But yet at the same time, the crafting tree seems like it was almost designed to be played this way, because the amount of components it takes to upgrade items is so unfeasible to get just from looting that it's almost like that they intended you to do this. I guess all this to say, if you want to keep your current style or be OP as fuck, spec into technical ability because it makes the entire game a breeze. If you're not doing this exploit, I guess, the game is significantly harder and definitely more fun to loot around in. Similar to games like Borderlands, everything scales to your level to a certain degree, so you'll be constantly swapping out your hardware, but at the same time, it can feel rewarding to get a really nice, rare piece of loot. That about sums it up for the items in the game. I mean, again, you can either exploit your way to complete absolute financial freedom, or you can, do the Borderlands grind, and that's about how deep it goes. So with all that said, let's move on to combat. The combat is probably one of the most enticing parts of the game. It's not by any means revolutionary, and the AI can sometimes go between being completely cracked aimbots to being completely stupid, just easy targets. But overall, it's very fluid and satisfying. As mentioned before, the tech tree allows you to spec into certain things that make your character better at certain aspects of combat. You can go for high mobility, where you're allowed to aim down sight during dodges and while time is slowed, and you can obviously get things that allow you to slow down time. Take certain perks that allow you to sprint and shoot. There's many different things you can do to adapt your character to whatever playstyle you're going for, and the game should be commended for that. Hell, thanks to quick hacks, you can clear out entire buildings without even setting foot in them. All you have to do is ping somebody, which will give you access and visuals on where everybody and every piece of equipment is, hack into a camera or two, upload certain NPCs with contagion or synapse burnout or short circuit, and killing everybody before you even set foot or are identified. And personally, I think that's cool. The game should be commended for allowing players to have dynamic decisions on how they want to approach combat. That is where CyberPunk shines. It allows you to dynamically engage in different combat scenarios. All that being said, it's not like it doesn't have its problems, as I already mentioned, and by the time you hit endgame with endgame level gear, you're basically wiping out everybody on the map quicker than they can identify you. So where does this leave CyberPunk? Well, I feel like I've covered most of what I wanted to talk about in this video, and I hate to say that most of it was negative. After seeing what was demonstrated in the 2018 gameplay trailer, I can't help but feel a little underwhelmed. I guess it's no surprise that's the consensus from the community right now. It's no surprise, and at the end of the day, CyberPunk was overpromised, underdelivered. I could speculate all day on whether or not this has to do with the Johnny Silverhand storyline becoming the main plot, or just wanting to hit those holiday sales figures. Whatever the case may be, they released the game early and in a state that feels honestly completely unfinished. I can't be sure. It feels to me like the game was further along before the change to Johnny Silverhand being the main focus. I almost speculate that what they did is they went back to an earlier version of the game. A lot of things in the trailer kind of add up to that. The graphics are downgraded from what we've seen. A lot of the features that they said were going to be in the game, again, they made sure to disclaim it, of course, in the trailer, but things like controlling the flathead, if that really was gameplay, it looks pretty finished, but they completely cut it out. And the only reason I could think for why they would have done all of that is because what they did is they said, okay, we've got Keanu Reeves and a bunch of star power. Let's go back to before we made this an RPG, and instead of making it an RPG, let's make it a narrative-driven action game. And that's what we got. So if I had to take a guess, this whole thing is because they wanted to basically shine with star power, and what we ended up with is an unbridled meh, which really is a shame. For a game whose ending credits song is titled Never Fade Away, I have bad news for you, CD Projekt Red. This game is going to fade away out of people's minds almost instantly. You guys had an opportunity to make such an amazing game. We can see it all throughout the remains of what we get to pick through, and it's just a shame. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you guys agree. If you don't, I'd love to hear what other people think. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say, guys. Take it easy.